Live Formula One.
And what a difference a day makes, from grey skies and heavy rain in qualifying yesterday to blue skies, puffy white clouds and sunshine. That is what we find above the Spa-Francorchamps circuit this afternoon ahead of the 14th race of the season, the last race before Formula One's summer break, with storylines up and down the field to watch out for on this historical circuit. In fact, Lewis Hamilton was full of nostalgia when he was making his way around on the flatbed truck earlier, waving to all the fans and down the Kemmel Straight, remembering the brilliant battles we've seen over the years, including Mika Häkkinen against Michael Schumacher, fiercely fighting on this track 24 years ago. You could see how happy Hamilton was to be here. And speak of fierce fighting, could we get that today? Well, with a Ferrari and a Red Bull sharing the front row, the McLarens tucked in behind, sprinkle in a couple of Mercedes, some fast midfield runners, and a Max Verstappen starting from 11th after a 10th-place grid penalty. The Belgian Grand Prix could be quite a busy one for us. Guiding you through all the coverage is myself, Harry Benjamin, and alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic, Mark Priestley. Have we got our work cut out this afternoon, Mark?
I mean, I kind of hope so, because it's, you're right, there's lots of storylines. I think that's what this race is all about, storylines. There's Max Verstappen starting a long way back with a very quick car. His teammate Sergio Perez, whose career is literally under threat right now, starts on the front row with a very fast car. Could he be the 8th winner in Formula One in this amazing season that's turning out? And, of course, the McLarens, we know, have been developing their car to a point of perhaps even being the fastest car at many of the racetracks we've got, and they start not very far back either, so it's all to play for.
It really is, isn't it? And look, this is a circuit that has been on the calendar since 1950. It's a circuit you can overtake on just over 7 kilometres, 19 turns, 10 to the right and 9 to the left. We're not actually in Spa, but in the town of Francorchamps in the Belgian Ardennes countryside, on the eastern side of Belgium, not too far away from the border of Germany. But certainly the rain that has threatened the early part of the weekend has gone away. Expecting a clean, dry race. Air temperature at the moment 20.7 degrees. Track temperature 39.1 degrees. But of course, Mark, all eyes will be on Max Verstappen to see what he can do. And let's talk to his boss, Christian Horner. Rosanna's with him.
Thanks, Harry. Christian, two very different races to manage today, with Max starting from P11 and Sergio on the front row. How are you approaching this one?
Well, look, it's going to be a very strategic race. The tyres on this asphalt that's new this year are going to be the key. So it's all going to be about tyre management and strategy.
And Sergio Perez needs a win, but Max Verstappen also needs a win for his Drivers' Championship. How do you manage them if they get up to the front together?
Oh, I don't mind which one wins, so long as one of them does. But look, it'd be good to get some good points today to take that into the summer break. That's the objective.
And there's been an amazing flyover there. This isn't Sergio Perez's last race for the team, is it?
Well, no. I mean, Sergio's our driver. We want to give him as much support as we can to get back to the form that he showed yesterday and that he showed at the beginning of the year.
And your biggest rival as you head into the summer break, is it McLaren now, do you think?
Yeah.
Perfect. Nice and simple. Have a great race.
Thank you.
Punchy questions from Rosanna Tennant, getting straight to the point. And how amazing is it that it's not too long ago, it was Imola, where Sergio Perez was announced as extending his stay at Red Bull. Front row start for him, his teammates down on 11th. This is the opportunity for Perez to show to Red Bull that he can be the man to take the wins, to take the points, when Verstappen cannot.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of what he needs to do today. I mean, for people at home listening and wondering why we're not talking about Charles Leclerc, the man who actually starts on in pole position for this Grand Prix, as being the favourite. We don't think he's got a car capable necessarily of delivering that level of performance over the entire Grand Prix, but Perez has. We know how good the Red Bull is. We know how good it is around this particular circuit. It's very, very fast in a straight line. This is a long, drawn out lap where top speeds are crucial. We know that's very strong for them as well, so he should win this Grand Prix. He's got everything in his capability, all the tools necessary to win this race. it's going to come down to his own mindset, his confidence levels. We know he's got the ability, he's done it before, we've had great performances from him, but in recent times it's been the headspace, I think, the confidence that's taken such a massive knock and has resulted in a number of mistakes. Today he can't let that happen.
Perez himself said after qualifying, it's not like I've forgotten how to drive. So he goes from second on the grids, and this is his best Grand Prix start since China, and that was 8 races ago. Meanwhile, his teammate Max Verstappen, with that 10th place grid penalty for an additional power unit element, was fastest in qualifying, but of course then takes those 10 places, knocked down to 11th. Throw back to 2022, same thing. He started from 14th place on that occasion and was up into the lead of the race within 12 laps. Are you expecting that again this afternoon?
I don't think quite the same level, but I do expect him to come through the field. Whether he can make it all the way to the front is going to be a storyline that only really we see play out towards the end of the Grand Prix. Not because he hasn't got the pace to do so, I think he probably has, but has he got the tyre management and the tyre life? He's got 2 new sets of medium tyres as opposed to most others around him having 2 sets of hard, which we think is going to be the sort of preferable tyre on a circuit that's got reasonably high degradation. It is a long race and a long lap, so it's going to be about, can Max Verstappen use that medium tyre and the punchiness of it, the sort of raceability of that tyre to make hay through the field, get past the cars in front of him, but can he also hang on to it to maintain that level of performance right the way to the end? That's, I think, going to be his biggest challenge.
Yeah, challenges up and down the grid. Indeed, for the 2 McLarens as well, who of course this time last week were on course for a 1-2 finish at the Hungarian Grand Prix. That is indeed what they got, but today they start 4th in the hands of Lando Norris and 5th in Oscar Piastri. Rosanna Tennant is with the CEO of McLaren, Zach Brown.
Zach, yesterday was a little bit of a trickier qualifying session, perhaps. Do you think you've got the race car to challenge for the win today?
I do. I think we've got 2 race cars that can challenge for the win, but I think there's 8 cars on the grid that can win, so it's going to be an exciting race. Need good strategy, good clean first lap, where the chips fall.
It's a beautiful day today. Is the weather playing to your strengths, do you think?
I think we're set up well for today's conditions. We were really good on Friday, so let's see.
Of course, you had such success last time out in Hungary, but everyone's now watching what you do from the pit wall point of view. What have you said to the engineers and the drivers this morning?
We got a plan, and we'll stick to our plan. So, we want to try and get both cars to the front and then see where we go from there.
Have a great race.
Thank you.
They've got a plan down at McLaren. Norris 4th, Piastri 5th. What are you expecting to see from them this afternoon, Mark?
I'm expecting good things, and actually, even though we're talking about 2 cars that are starting 4th and 5th, they're my tip for the win here. I think Lando Norris particularly, but actually either of them could well have a car quick enough with great tyre management. For all we were just saying about Verstappen's challenges with tyre management, Lando Norris has really good tyre management, so I expect the McLaren to do really well.
Well, just ahead of them is Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes. Rosanna Tennant is with Toto Wolff.
Toto said to grab him when I'm ready. I'm ready to talk to you now, Toto. Thank you for waiting. It's getting hotter. I'm enjoying the sunshine. It's making me think of the summer holidays, but I'm imagining this is not what you were after.
No, we haven't been great in the warm, so it's going to be a difficult one, I guess.
What is possible, though, with this car? You've had some frustration over the weekend with the upgrade not working, having to take it off the car. Are you hoping to learn a little bit about the car?
It wasn't that the upgrade wasn't working, but we had a few question marks, and that's why we want to establish a baseline now, but that's going to come onto the car.
Lewis and George were both saying there are so many unknowns going into this race. Are you feeling a little nervous?
Well, I have done a few races now, so it's not nervous. I'm excited to see how we're doing.
Wow, my ears. Well, have a great race. Lewis just getting into the car now. We'll see how you guys go.
Thank you very much.
Team principal of Mercedes, Toto Wolff, speaking to a now deaf Rosanna Tennant, standing right next to the wheel guns there. But Lewis Hamilton goes from 3rd. George Russell, not quite as good a qualifying from him, down in 6th. But the 2 Mercedes then appearing with a little bit of work on their hands. In the bottom half of the top 10, one highlight for me is actually Esteban Ocon going from 9th. That Alpine looked mega quick yesterday in qualifying, and they're pretty bullish ahead of the race today.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an up and down season for Alpine in lots of ways, on and off track actually. But I think you're right. They've had a few results recently where they've scored points, and if you think back to the start of the season, they were quite consistently right down the back and in no hope of scoring points. So they've made some major improvements, but this weekend, particularly in the hands of Ocon, and yes, it was raining yesterday, which meant very different conditions, but in those conditions particularly, Esteban Ocon was at times the fastest man on the racetrack at certain parts of this lap. So they have an opportunity. With the two Mercedes, as you just heard Toto Wolff saying there, they may well struggle in these higher temperatures. Their car doesn't seem to work very well in that. It will give people like Esteban Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz in the second Ferrari the opportunity and the hope that they can all start to move forward.
Certainly will. Let's come back to the top of the grid and our pole sitter Charles Leclerc, because okay, the car might not be out and out fast enough to compete in terms of pace, but one thing that really can get you and catch you out as the pole sitter here, if you get a good start, is that slipstream effect, which no matter how quick your car is, you're almost defenseless.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost an argument that you don't really want to be on pole here, because actually being on the other side of the grid, if you can tuck in and get through the first corner, which comes relatively quickly, very slow corner, and then you get this very long, very fast run all the way down the hill to Eau Rouge, up the other side through Radion, and then you're onto this long Kemmel Straight, which is incredibly long, and even without the benefit of DRS, the slipstream effect is so powerful that if you can get through turn one in second place rather than in the lead, you've got a great opportunity, at least by the end of that straight, to outdrag your opponent and get into the front. So that'll be perhaps Charles's biggest challenge, is staying in front for the first couple of laps.
Yeah, one of the main issues that Ferrari have been dealing with in the last couple of races, which has seen them fall off the competitive order really, is having to deal with these recurring bouncing issues that have suddenly been introduced since they brought in a new upgrade around about the Imola time. They had a similar upgrade since then, and now Charles Leclerc speaking ahead of the race, all about just trying to find consistency and optimising the package they have, but to try and cure those bouncing issues, they're having to add a little bit more to the car, which slows it down even more on the straights. And here, where you need almost a skinny rear wing, don't you, like Esteban Ocon on the back of that Alpine, which makes him mega in sector one, but not so much through sector two.
And this was the challenge from yesterday, because it was wet in qualifying, and for the whole day in wet conditions you want a higher downforce setup to give you that extra amount of grip. But of course the drivers and teams had to think about today's race, which isn't wet, and I think the McLarens particularly and noticeably went for a lower downforce setup, which has put them in a slightly awkward position, 4th and 5th on the grid, where they might have expected or hoped to be higher. But in the race today, that should really favour them. So expect the McLarens, and you're right, Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, to start doing some overtaking down that long straight.
In terms of tyres, Pirelli have brought the middle of the range compounds this weekend, the C2 hard, the C3 medium and the C4 soft. We're mainly expecting to see the medium and hard used, but in terms of strategy, what are we thinking for the 44 laps ahead of us?
Almost certainly a two-stopper. I think if we get things like a safety car, of course you might find someone going for a three-stop later in the Grand Prix, for example, but on a standard race I think it's going to be a two-stopper. Most people, I imagine, starting on the medium tyre and then switching to a hard tyre for those that have them. So most of the cars at the front have two new hard tyres. They're the ones that we think will last longest and give decent performance in these conditions. Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, they have two mediums, so they don't have two of the new hard tyres, they have two new mediums, so they will be forced to play this slightly differently to those around them, which for us would be great, because by the end of the Grand Prix we might see a number of different strategies kind of converging, and that should give us a nice exciting finish.
It really should. We will run you through the whole grid at the top of the hour ahead of Lights Out for the Belgian Grand Prix. One other thing to note as well, that the track was actually resurfaced in parts a couple of months ago. We've almost got a bit of a green track today because there was rain early doors yesterday, and that kind of just resets everything. Yeah,
that's right. So it will be a little bit low grip anyway on a fresh surface like this. It'll grip up, of course, as the race goes on and we get more and more rubber down, so the grip levels will improve as the race plays out. But it is going to be a challenge, and again, very different conditions to when the cars were last driven, i.e. yesterday in the wet. So the first couple of laps are going to be a little bit exploratory.
It certainly will. Well, the sun is shining down on the 20 cars that make up the starting grid for this, what has become a staple of the calendar, Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, despite facing increasing scrutiny for its place on the calendar amid the huge expansion. Now 24 races on the Formula One calendar this season, the longest in its history, and indeed this the final round before the August summer break and the F1 summer summer shutdown, this round 14, the longest first half of a season that we've had at the moment. So are the drivers and the teams going to be a little bit tired as well?
I don't think tired. Everyone will definitely be ready for a break, that's for sure. It's an intense season, but I think, you know, we're not going to be giving up. No one's going to be easing off. No one's going to be backing off and having that last day of school feel. It's going to be absolutely foot to the floor as soon as we get these lights going green.
It certainly will be. Now, just for your loyal listeners on the BBC Sport website and app, we will be joining the main station on BBC Radio 5 Live shortly. So if we do have a little bit of a pause, that will be the reason why. Don't worry, don't readjust your wireless or your sound speaker. We will be continuing with the coverage of the Grand Prix. But we are almost set then, 44 laps ahead of us for the Belgian Grand Prix. And it's time for the Belgian Grand Prix. Thank you very much, Mark. Indeed, the cars have just set up on their formation lap. Welcome to Belgium. This is round 14 of the Formula One World Championship, the last race before the summer shutdown, where we have a month off before our next race, and storylines up and down the field. Let's just take you through the starting grid. On pole position, it's Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Alongside him is Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Lewis Hamilton is third. Then it's the two McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri that round out the top five. Russell, Sainz, Alonso the top 8, then it's Esteban Ocon and Alex Albon making up the top 10. Max Verstappen starts from 11th place. He was actually quickest in yesterday's qualifying, but has a 10th place grid penalty for an additional power unit element, so starts from 11th. Gasly is 12th ahead of Ricciardo. Bottas and Stroll the top 15. Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen are 16th and 17th. Then it's Logan Sargent, Joe Guan Yu is 19th, and Yuki Tsunoda 20th and last, after also taking additional power unit elements and getting a grid penalty. They're just making their way now into the final sector. Before we get lights out, let's check in with a cricket update. Henry Moran. Thanks, Henry. This is Formula One coverage on BBC Radio 5 Live. For uninterrupted coverage, you can listen on the BBC Sport website and app. We are moments away from lights out for the Belgian Grand Prix with myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley. Down in the paddock is Rosanna Tennant. Mark, Leclerc starts on pole, Perez alongside, Verstappen going from outside the top 10. What are your predictions in this early part of the race? Yeah, I think we're going to be looking at Sergio Perez to make a great start. That's what he needs to do. He needs to get in front of that Ferrari alongside him on the grid and start controlling the race. Verstappen has a lot of work to do from P11, but he's got a car very much capable of doing it. Just pulling through the bus stop chicane now, that final slow chicane that leads you on to the start-finish straight. Just over 7 kilometres this track, the longest on the calendar. 19 turns, 10 to the right and 9 to the left, and the run down to the start-finish straight to turn 1, La Source from pole position, which will be on the left-hand side, 150 metres, or indeed the right-hand side, I should say, as the driver looks at it, on the left-hand side as we look at it. But drivers just slotting into their grid positions, giving you an update on the constructors and the drivers' standings. Max Verstappen leads the way by 76 points, 265 to his name, ahead of Lando Norris. Leclerc, Sainz and Piastri round out the top 5 in the drivers. Then in the Constructors' Championship, it's Red Bull lead the way, 51 points clear of McLaren, Ferrari third, Mercedes, Aston Martin the top 5, and indeed Yuki Tsunoda, the last car on the grid in the RB, just making his way through the bus stop chicane now. We will get this race underway. Rosanna Tennant down in the paddock.
Yeah, it's incredibly warm today, Harry. So different from the conditions we saw for yesterday's qualifying session. Fans are in the grandstand. I hope all's well with the pole sitter, Charles Leclerc. His car was being worked on while I was on the grid. I hope he's okay.
20 cars on the starting grid for the Belgian Grand Prix. Sergio Perez starts second. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is on pole position. It's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing in Belgium. It's a good start from Leclerc. Perez is having to fend off Hamilton, who's made a great start down the inside of Perez. Leclerc leads out through the source. Perez trying to come back at Lewis Hamilton. Lando Norris runs out wide, picks up a bit of gravel on the exit of La Source as they run down through Eau Rouge, a 35-metre elevation change, uphill, over the hill at Radion, down that long Kemmel straight. The slipstream power so effective. Leclerc leads the way. Hamilton's up to second, but Perez is fighting back in. The Red Bull and Mercedes side by side, and into the breaking point of Les Combes. It's the Mercedes that wins out. Hamilton second, Leclerc leads.
Well, it wasn't quite the start that Sergio Perez needed, but it's not the end of the world for him. He's sitting in third place, but he's got a very quick car, and you can overtake on this circuit. He will now just need to tuck in, get himself under control, and the opportunities are still going to come to him. With Charles Leclerc sitting in front, though, that's exactly what he needed. He wasn't even expecting to stay in the lead by the end of lap 1, and at the moment, that's exactly what he's done.
Good start from George Russell as well. The second Mercedes, he's made a gain up into fifth. Lando Norris did run out wide, coming through La Source, dipped a wheel onto the gravel, and that's costing positions to Russell and Carlos Sainz. Norris now down in seventh, just ahead of Alex Albon, who's also made a great start in that Williams. Max Verstappen, though, from 11th on the grid, is already up and inside the top 10, making his way up into ninth. But towards the end of lap 1 of 44 here at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit for the Belgian Grand Prix, it's the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, who inherited pole position yesterday, but carries the lead ahead now of Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes. Then it's Sergio Perez, Oscar Piastri, George Russell the top 5, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, Alex Albon the top 8. Then comes Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso rounds out the top 10. But that second Red Bull of Max Verstappen hounding the Williams behind him is almost trying to come back. Albon trying to come back at Verstappen through the bus stop chicane. Verstappen fends him off and has the position once again coming through La Source.
Yeah, Max Verstappen looking very, very racy, and of course he has to make these medium-clad tyres, the medium yellow wall tyres that he's got in his car. He's got 2 sets of those, as opposed to most other people having 2 of the new hard tyre, which might be the more preferred tyre. It's going to go longer into the race and have that performance for a much longer time. Max has got to make use of the grip that he's got right now.
DRS now activated, the drag reduction system, the rear wing flap flies open, and Oscar Piastri making a move on the Ferrari of Lando Norris, I should say, making a move on the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz towards the end of the Kemmel straight. Brakes so late, almost takes out the Mercedes of George Russell in front of him, and then Norris has to bail out of the corner, lets the Ferrari back through. Norris fighting with Sainz over 6th place, getting mightily close to a collision there for Lando Norris.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I mean, a real disappointment for the McLaren of Lando Norris. That poor start has really cost him, because now he's tucked back in a pack. He's sat behind the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, which is not where he wants to be. He's got a faster car than Carlos, and he will now need to get himself calm and under control. He's a little bit, seems like he's a little bit racy at the moment, a little bit sort of frustrated in where he is. You saw him run off just a moment ago, trying to get past the Ferrari. He needs to calm himself down. It is a long race, and he's got a car that's very good on tyre management. They don't tend to go through their tyres at the same rate that the likes of Ferrari will do around them. So the opportunities will come to him. He can afford to be a little bit patient, but he does need to make his way forward, because I think he's got a car capable of winning this race.
Well, he's going to have Verstappen right up behind him shortly, who's now dispatched Fernando Alonso. Verstappen up into 8th at the end of lap 2 as we begin lap 3 of 44 here at the Belgian Grand Prix. It's Charles Leclerc who leads for now, but he cannot shake Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes, who started 3rd with a fantastic start, is up into 2nd and is hounding the back of the Scarlet Red Ferrari in front of him with the DRS now active, that drag reduction system. The rear wing flap opens when you're within a second of the car in front, gives you an extra 0.6 of a second up the hill, over Eau Rouge, down the Kemmel straight with DRS. Hamilton breezes past the Ferrari of Leclerc, and Hamilton takes the lead of the Belgian Grand Prix on lap 3. Lewis Hamilton leads for Mercedes, out through Les Combes, through Malmedy and down towards Beau Rivage. Hamilton ahead of Leclerc, Perez 3rd, Piastri 4th, Russell 5th.
Yeah, that is not where Lewis Hamilton expected to be today, but he's made an incredible start, and I think he would have even got past the Ferrari without the benefit of DRS. Such was his run up the hill out of Radion, through Eau Rouge and up Radion into the Kemmel Straight. He has so much more speed than the Ferrari in front of him. He's now got the opportunity to break the DRS gap, that 1 second that he needs to be in front of Charles Leclerc. If he can do that, he's then got an opportunity to control things a little bit. Sergio Perez, for me, is the one that I'm most surprised at, because we know how fast that Red Bull is, and yet he's making absolutely no inroads into what is now the Ferrari of Leclerc in front of him. He couldn't do anything about Lewis Hamilton. He's seemingly a little bit stuck.
Oh, and we've got a slow car out on track. It's the Sauber of Zhou Guanyu, who has fallen all the way to the back of the pack. Indeed, he started in 19th. He had made a couple of gains, but he is going very slowly coming through turn 10.
I'm losing power, guys. So losing hydraulic with it. I try, mate. I try to bring it back.
Such a shame for Zhou Guanyu, who sounds like he will be out of this race as we get towards the start now of lap 4. It's Hamilton who leads now by almost a second to Charles Leclerc. Perez is 3rd, Piastri 4th, then comes Russell, Sainz, Norris, who is now having to defend from Verstappen behind. Fernando Alonso is 9th, and Alex Albon rounds out the top 10, and they are your current point scorers. Down in the pit lane for us is Rosanna Tennant.
Harry, there was a huge cheer as Lewis Hamilton made that move on Charles Leclerc. The fans here at Spa-Francorchamps loving that, seeing the Mercedes driver out front. And don't forget, Lewis Hamilton was a little bit apprehensive about this race. They tried some things, changed some things overnight on Friday, but didn't get a chance to try them out yesterday because it was wet. He said it was a race into the unknown. He's proving that it's all going quite nicely for them this afternoon. But hey, we've still got quite a lot of this Grand Prix to go.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton certainly enjoying himself out there, the man who actually has won around this circuit 4 times, looking at a 5th right now, but there's still a long way to go in this race. We're expecting a 2-stop strategy. Everybody is on the medium tyre with the exception of Carlos Sainz, who started on the harder compound, and Zhou Guanyu, who now looks like he might be out of this race. Daniel Ricciardo started outside of the top 10. He actually elected for the soft tyre, so we'll see how that strategy pans out for Ricciardo, who looked very fast in yesterday's qualifying, frustrated not to get into the top 10, a man who could be in contention for that 2nd Red Bull seat, maybe at the end of the summer break as we enter the second half of the season. This, the final race before that summer break, round 14 of 24, the Belgian Grand Prix. Hamilton leads that gap, almost getting to a 2nd. Perez then another 2nd back from Charles Leclerc, but the closest fight right now is looking between, well, Max Verstappen is ominously closing on to the back of Lando Norris as we get towards the end of lap 4, beginning lap 5, out through the bus stop chicane. He'll get the first dose of DRS down towards La Source, but I don't think he's close enough on this occasion.
No, not yet. It's a real DRS train at the moment. The gap's not opening up, so everybody in the top 10 pretty much in the DRS zone from the car in front of them. Carlos Sainz on that harder tyre, the hard compound, the only one in the top 10, in fact the only one on the race, I think, apart from Ojo as well, on the hard compound. He's going to be able to run much longer. The first pit stops for the medium-clad runners we would expect to happen around about lap 10, lap 12. The hard compound tyre, of course, will go quite a lot longer, and Carlos Sainz at the moment making really good use of that. Right up underneath the rear wing of George Russell's Mercedes, he could be the next man to make a move.
And just ahead of Russell's Mercedes is the McLaren of Piastri, who had a little dart down the inside of Perez right at the end of the Kemmel Straight. Piastri very confident on his brakes at the end of that long straight that leads you towards Les Combes, but had to tuck in behind Perez. Zhou Guanyu is still continuing out there. We're just getting another look at the start of the race, and what a start by Hamilton, but he did force the matter.
Yeah, he had to force the matter, get his elbows out, because the Red Bull of Sergio Perez was very much alongside him. It was the initial launch from Hamilton that pulled him right up level with Sergio Perez's Red Bull. They went wheel to wheel through turn 1, nobody giving an inch, but both got through there safely. That was a really good start from Hamilton. It set him up nicely with the lead of this Grand Prix with, 5 laps gone?
Certainly is, and Lando Norris was the McLaren that just went a little bit wide out through La Source. That's the exit of turn 1, had the outside and then just dipped a wheel, the left rear, into the gravel, and that allowed both Russell and the Ferrari of Sainz through. Indeed, he was lucky to keep Alonso and Ocon behind him, and along with Alex Albon too. Actually, Ocon made a bit of a poor start for the Frenchman, who did start inside the top 10 in that Alpine. but that was how the start panned out. This is the Belgian Grand Prix. We've also got coverage of the cricket elsewhere. Let's head down to Henry Moran. Thanks, Henry, and coverage continues of the cricket over on Sports Extra right now on BBC Radio 5 Live, and uninterrupted coverage of the Formula 1 Grand Prix from Belgium on the BBC Sport website and app. It's lap 6 of 44 of the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, the longest circuit on the calendar, just over 7 kilometres in length, and it's Lewis Hamilton who leads for Mercedes by now over a second, ahead of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Sergio Perez is third. That was Lewis Hamilton on the radio saying something is moving down my legs.
I dread to think what that could be, but it's certainly not the sort of sensation he wants to be feeling while he's leading a Grand Prix, but we'll try and get some more on that when it comes. But what he has done is made a very good start here, because he's broken DRS. Leclerc behind him has also crucially broken DRS to Sergio Perez, and it's Perez who's now has a fast McLaren behind him in the hands of Oscar Piastri, who's still within that DRS zone. Max Verstappen flying up through the field. He's in P8 right now with a very quick car. We talked about Perez having a real opportunity here to bolster his confidence, to give himself that boost, and perhaps even save his career. But what happens if he ends up in a situation where his teammate, who started the race in 11th, finds his way, which he's already on the way to doing, very quickly up behind him, and even overtaking the other Red Bull car of Perez? That could be the opposite effect. That could really kill his confidence and maybe even his career.
It certainly could. Just behind Sergio Perez in third is Oscar Piastri fourth. George Russell rounds out the top 5. Then it's Carlos Sainz holding his own on that harder compound tyre and SIG. Norris 7th, still ahead of Verstappen, who is now half a second behind the British racer. Alonso 9th, Albon 10th. Then comes Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, Ricciardo and Stroll, the top 15. Hulkenberg and Magnussen 16th and 17th. Tsunoda is 18th, ahead of Logan Sargent. And Zhou Guanyu, reporting issues a few laps around, stayed out on track, but has now come into the pits for what looks like a retirement for the Chinese driver. Could be his second retirement of the season for the team that is struggling. 0 points to Sauber's name so far, the only team yet to score a point.
Yeah, Piastri was just shaping up for a move on the back of Perez, but he's actually just dropped out of the DRS zone. He's got a few more corners as they close out the lap to come round and get into that DRS zone for that crucial long run from all the way from turn 1 down through Eau Rouge and up the hill of Radion and onto that Kemmel Straight. That's the biggest overtaking opportunity, so he needs to close up now, which he's just trying to do, but the gap's just gradually starting to open out a little bit. We're in this little sort of tyre preservation phase now, because in about 3 or 4 laps time we might start seeing the first of those planned 2-stop strategy pit stops for those on the medium tyres.
Yeah, it is certainly going to be a bit of a tyre management race. And I also wonder whether Perez has been doing that from a little bit earlier on, which is why he's not made the massive inroads he has done. Just looking at the lap times now, last lap around for Lewis Hamilton, a 1:49.3. Leclerc, a 1:49.7. Perez, a little bit quicker, a 1:49.6. So Perez slightly quicker than the Ferrari in front of him, but Hamilton has the pace over both of them, indeed extending his advantage out in the lead by almost 2 seconds now.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good stuff from Hamilton. This is exactly what he needed. And it is a real surprise, because the higher temperatures that we've got today weren't expected to suit the Mercedes. If we go back over recent races, it's been the cooler climates which have really brought their car alive. Today we've got reasonable temperatures, a track temperature of 42 degrees. And actually, he looks like he's doing very well. Great, the fastest lap of the Grand Prix as well so far, and hanging on nicely to that lead, controlling the race as we get the first pit stop from Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah, Nico Hulkenberg has come in at the end of lap 7 and put a hard tyre on, so he drops all the way to the back of the grid. 19th place for the German in the Haas. A bit of clear air for him, no doubt, at least, because that second half of the field very much stuck in a bit of a traffic jam, and Zhou Guanyu is confirmed as out of this race. So only 19 runners still in this one. Lap 8 of 44 of the Belgian Grand Prix. It's Lewis Hamilton who leads by over 1.5 seconds. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who started on pole position, is second. Perez third. Piastri fourth. Russell fifth. Sainz just behind. Then it's Norris and Verstappen, who started 11th after a 10th place grid penalty. Alonso 9th, and Albon very much holding his own in the Williams in that final points-paying position, but Esteban Ocon on the Alpine is right behind him, along with his teammate Gasly. We know how quick those Alpines are in a straight line with a very skinny rear wing, helping them down that long Kemmel straight in the first part of this lap.
So just looking at tyres, Daniel Ricciardo is the only man to start the race on the soft tyre. Of course, he was hoping to get a good start off the line with that, the extra performance it gives you. It hasn't really worked for him. He is still hanging on to the tyre, so he's not having to make a dramatically early pit stop, but he hasn't made the gains on track. But the man who started on the hard tyre, Carlos Sainz, that's what everyone's going to be looking at inside the top 10 at least, because Carlos Sainz is on the tyre that we expect most people, particularly those in and around the front, to switch onto at their first pit stop. So everyone getting good information. And if I look at Carlos Sainz's lap times, very respectable on the hard tyre in terms of the comparison to the medium tyre, as we get a few more people peeling into the pits.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo's coming to get rid of those soft tyres. Alex Albon in as well, along with Logan Sargent. So Williams doing a double stop there. So those in the second half of the field electing to make those pit stops. I think they're all a little bit stuck in a traffic jam and that DRS train where everybody is really getting the same advantage, so no one can move forward.
Oscar, plan A or B? What do you think?
I think A.
Sorry, Nick, that was Oscar Piastri being told plan A or plan B. He's thinking plan A, which you would expect to be that two-stop strategy of going the medium tyre that he's on now, that he started the race onto, and then onto the hard tyre, which you know he's got 2 sets of for this Grand Prix. So you'd imagine that would be plan A. The exact stop lap will be what he's exactly referring to, and we of course don't know what that is, but it's expected to be any time around now. We've seen those guys at the back just starting to make their stops. The guys at the front will be hoping for a gap to open up, in which when they do stop, they can drop nicely back into.
Certainly can. It's lap 9 of 44 of the Belgian Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton leads by 2 seconds. Leclerc second. Sergio Perez is third. Piastri and Russell round out the top 5. Max Verstappen is currently 8th, chasing down Lando Norris. Verstappen having started from outside the top 10. Pit stops currently underway. Live uninterrupted coverage continues of the Belgian Grand Prix over on the BBC Sport website and app. But for now, let's head back to Paris for continued Olympics coverage. Mark. And for you loyal listeners on the BBC Sport website and app, and indeed your chosen smart speaker, we don't go anywhere. Lap 10 of 44, it's Hamilton who leads. Gasly has just come into the pits. That's the sound you're hearing as the mechanics get to work changing those tyres. 2.6 seconds. So those in the lower half electing to pit, and that has bumped up the likes of Ocon into the top 10, Bottas 11th, Stroll 12th, Magnussen 13th. I think we just saw a radio message pop up from Lewis Hamilton. Oh, as Lando Norris runs a little bit wide, coming through Malmedy into the gravel once again, just costing him a little bit of time to Verstappen, who's still tucked up behind him. I think Hamilton, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, was just on the radio saying something about struggling with the tyres.
He said, well, he actually said tyres are still okay, but the rear tyres are just starting to drop away, and that is what you'd expect here. It's pretty tight on, tough on tyres. There's a lot of energy going through the tyres, very high speed corners, some long duration corners as well. So you do build up temperature, you start to get degradation. That's what he's talking about, and that's crucial information, of course, for the team, because they don't want to pit. He's leading this Grand Prix. They don't want to pit any earlier than they have to. When he pits now, he'll be dropping back into some considerable traffic. What he wants to do is try and hang on as long as he can, as long as those tyres are giving him performance, until a gap opens up. So when the cars behind him begin to stop, you'll start to see bigger and bigger gaps opening up, slots within the traffic, which they can then drop him back into. Because that means when he gets onto his new tyres, he can really go for it unimpeded and make the best use of the fresh rubber that he's going to go onto.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky to find a bit of a gap at the moment, as Verstappen, though, is tired of being stuck behind Lando Norris. So Red Bull have elected to call him into pit. So too is the Mercedes of George Russell. Here comes Verstappen then. It's a quick journey into his pit box. It's the first garage you come to. Russell's already out 2.3 seconds, and it's slow from Red Bull, which you don't see too often.
Yeah, I couldn't quite see it, but I think it was the front end looked a little bit slow on Verstappen's stop. 2.7 seconds, it's still a blink of an eye, isn't it? But in today's standards, that can potentially hamper him. Half a second he'll have lost there to the likes of Russell. But crucially, he's trying now to undercut Lando Norris. puts a fresh set of tyres on, if he's got a bit of clear space in front of him, which I think he will have, he'll be able to make use of that tyre, get in some very quick laps hopefully, and by the time Lando Norris is able to respond and come in for his stop, Verstappen and Red Bull will be hoping they're in front.
This is the thing, it's such a long lap here that you're almost a bit helpless if you're undercut, because you've got to either stay on the track and endure the pain of a 7 kilometre lap, or then you've just got to keep staying out if you feel like you can't come into the pits because you might lose that position. Verstappen's fed out in 14th place, just behind the RB of Yuki Tsunoda, who I can't imagine will be too much of an issue to get by. Tsunoda, who started plumb last, has now made his way up into 13th due to those who have stopped behind. Further back, Nico Hülkenberg's just made a rather lovely move at the end of the Kemmel Straight to get ahead of Pierre Gasly, and then through Lecon, making that one stick. It's over 17th at the moment. Hülkenberg, the first driver in this race to pit early doors. His teammate is up to 11th and doing great battle with the Mercedes of Russell is coming into the Fania. The Red Bull of Max Verstappen and the RB of Yuki Tsunoda getting very close indeed, and right ahead of them a brilliant battle side by side through Blanchimont. You don't see that too often. Russell getting ahead of Magnussen, 11th and 12th, as Hamilton comes into the pit lane along with Perez.
Yeah, that's it. The race leaders all diving into the pits. Piastri as well now. So everybody now diving in to put on what I think will be on everybody's car fresh, hard compound tyres. That'll give them a much longer stint. It's exactly what Verstappen has done as well. A longer stint, fresh tyres. Let's have a look at Perez as he comes out. I think he's on the hard tyre as well. No, Perez on the medium tyre. So Perez going a slightly different route to Verstappen. Medium tyres on that one, hard tyres on Verstappen's Red Bull.
Russell's got ahead of Piastri as well, side by side coming out of the pit lane, but Piastri is going to have the momentum. They're both going to have DRS down the Kemmel Straight. Piastri pulls to the inside. He'll have the inside line. He's been liking the move there. Late on the brakes for Piastri. Gets back in front of George Russell. It's for 9th on the road as it stands. Perez just ahead of them, but Perez, Piastri have just pitted. Russell pitted the lap before. Hamilton has fed out from his pit stop in 6th spot, so Leclerc yet to pit. So too for Carlos Sainz. It's the Ferraris 1 and 2. Lando Norris has elected to stay out as well. He's up to 3rd, with Alonso and Ocon rounding out the top 5. The top 5 all yet to pit.
Yeah, so Lando Norris didn't really have a lot of choice. He either had to respond immediately. Here's Leclerc.
If we are getting undercut, let's go now.
And that's exactly what I was just about to say with Lando Norris. He was getting undercut by Max Verstappen, so his only option now really is to stay out on track and go long.
I'll tell you what, Lance Stroll might well cost Sergio Perez a position here, because Lance Stroll is 7th, having not pitted, approaching Blanchimont. Perez can't find a way through, who has pitted, and Piastri is right behind Perez. This could be for a net 3rd position when it all shakes out. It's still early stages, lap 13 of 44. Perez is going to try for a look down the inside of the bus stop chicane. Can't make it happen. Stroll gets out of the way as he comes into the pits, but that has cost Perez time as Charles Leclerc comes into the pits, heading down though towards La Source. Perez comes into turn 1, followed closely by Piastri. Leclerc's going to feed out at the same time. Will he be ahead? Yes, he will. Leclerc holds the position ahead of Perez, then comes Piastri, and then Russell.
And then Verstappen right behind them as well. And at the end of this Kemmel Straight, they are going to be very close to each other. Onto the Kemmel Straight they go now. Very, very long. DRS wide open on the rear wing of Piastri, and he pulls out alongside the Red Bull, and I think he's going to sail past. He does so as they get to the braking zone at the end of that straight. Piastri up into 6th place.
And that could be for a net 3rd position, possibly, and a podium up for grabs there for Oscar Piastri. Once those ahead pit, Carlos Sainz leads this race, has yet to pit. He's ahead of Lando Norris, also yet to pit, and Fernando Alonso is 3rd, yet to pit. Hamilton then, first of the pit stoppers, is currently 4th. Leclerc behind, Piastri ahead of Perez, then comes Russell. Verstappen 9th with the fastest lap of this race. Magnussen rounds out the top 10, and we're just getting a little replay of the pit stops, and that was close. Hamilton being released into the path of Oscar Piastri.
It was very, very close, and if the race officials want to look at it, it will be, did Piastri have to actually affect his entry into the pit lane to avoid Hamilton? It's difficult to say. Very, very close. I suspect they'll all get away with it. Maybe you could call it perfection.
Well, I imagine McLaren might well be on to the stewards on that one to try and see if they can get a bit of an unsafe release against the Mercedes team, but we'll let you know how that one pans out. Nothing has popped up on our screens just yet, but in the last couple of laps, Verstappen having pitted, making some good moves to get his way through the traffic, making a move on Tsunoda as well as one of the other cars as well. Didn't quite see who it was, but Perez, his teammate, is 6th now. Russell 7th, Verstappen 8th. They've all just gone up one position because Fernando Alonso has finally come into the pit. So just Carlos Sainz then, who, remember, started on the hard tyre, so he was always going to go a little longer than those who started on the medium. He's got 2.5 seconds ahead of Lando Norris, who is also yet to pit. 1 and 2 in this race, yet to pit.
And of course, as I said earlier on, the information that everybody's getting about the length of stint that Carlos Sainz is able to do with performance on that harder tyre in the Ferrari will be valuable knowledge to everybody else who's now switched onto it. Verstappen is one of those. He's gone onto his new hard tyre. When he makes his final stop a little bit later in the race, it'll have to be to go back onto a medium tyre. So he wants to go as long as he can in this stint on the hard tyre. His teammate Perez is on the medium tyre, which should be faster right now, and yet Max Verstappen is very quickly closing up only George Russell between Verstappen and Perez now. And don't forget, Verstappen started P11 in this race with Perez on the front row.
Lando, 100% pace, please. 100% pace.
And that is because, that's a message to Lando Norris, and that is because of that undercut that Max Verstappen tried to pull on Lando Norris. When Lando pulls into the pits, which of course he's going to do now, that message is a bit of a hurry up on his in-lap. He'll get called into the pits very shortly. Is he going to come out ahead of Verstappen? It's going to be close.
It's going to be close. There is a little bit of a gap between Verstappen and Magnussen, but it is fine margins. Magnussen's currently 9th, hasn't pitted. So too for Yuki Tsunoda, who is currently rounding out the top 10. And lap 15 of 44 for the Belgian Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz leads for Ferrari, but he is yet to pit. Lando Norris in 2nd. Currently, strategy playing the team pit wall as to what they do. They are 2nd, haven't pitted yet, and doesn't come into the pits this time around. Verstappen and Red Bull trying to get the undercut on Lando Norris. They were neck and neck in this race in the lower half of the top 10, but how it plays out is still up for grabs. It is lap 15, and we're getting towards, well, we're well past 25% distance now. Let's bring in the BBC's F1 correspondent after Lance Stroll.
Straight line speed is a joke.
That was Lance Stroll, who is not particularly happy in his Aston Martin. He's all the way down in 18th as Alex Albon down the Kemmel Straight cruises past Yuki Tsunoda, who has still yet to pit, whereas Albon has indeed done so. The BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, 15 laps into this race. What are your thoughts on the runners and riders?
Well, it's absolutely wide open at the moment, Harry. Any one of 5 or 6 cars could win, I think, at this moment. Hamilton's obviously in decent position in the lead by 1.5 seconds or so from Leclerc. Norris, not for the first time, and he's in 2nd place at the moment behind Carlos Sainz, running long on the hot tyre on the Ferrari. Norris is on an offset strategy from Verstappen, so he's going to come out behind Verstappen by around about 3 or 4 seconds, probably, at the moment when he pits, depending on when the lap is. Then he'll be trying to come back at him on fresher tyres in the course of the race. Here's some Norris radio coming up. He's coming into the pits, in fact. So let's see, but I'm predicting he's going to be about he's going to be 4 seconds or so behind Verstappen, I would imagine.
Okay, thanks Andrew. Lando Norris has indeed come into the pits. Let's head down to Rosanna Tennant.
And it's a nice quiet pit lane for Lando Norris. He comes into his box, the mechanic's set to work, the tyres are off and the hard tyres go on, and he is on his way again. No one else to interfere with that pit stop for him, unlike his teammate Oscar Piastri. Here he is. He's going to come back out. It was a 2.3 second stop. Where is he going to come out, Harry? Keep an eye on the road. Who's he going to be out in front of or behind?
He is going to be behind Max Verstappen, as Andrew just said, and the margins were tight, but Verstappen is now heading up through Eau Rouge over the top of the hill and on his way towards the Kemmel Straight as Lando Norris feeds out behind. 6 seconds the gap between Verstappen and Norris. So as Andrew said though, Norris running an offset strategy. He's now switched on to the hard tyre, same as Verstappen, but Norris's are a lot fresher.
And when they make their final pit stops, we expect Norris to go onto another hard tyre. So really it's going to be all about which tyre is performing best in these conditions at this phase of the race. Don't forget, of course, the track, which has been freshly resurfaced, is gripping up as we see Carlos Sainz run wide from the lead of this race into the gravel, keeps it going, manages to get it back on track, but that could have been a big one. He's manages to keep going, but he, all four wheels over the curb, big power slide and into the gravel trap.
Yeah, that was a close one for Carlos Sainz, who hasn't come into the pits yet. Further back, the two Alpines doing battle into La Source, and on this occasion it ends fairly well. Ocon behind Gasly and then getting ahead of him, and then Ocon also picking off the Haas as well of Nico Hülkenberg down the Kemmel Straight, and that Alpine absolutely mighty in a straight line around this track. So Ocon 13th, Hülkenberg 14th, Gasly 15th, outside of the points as it stands. Sainz currently leads.
Fernando, we are going to try and undercut Carlos. We think it will happen for free, but we want to do that, then we'll worry about it.
So he's talking about Carlos Sainz, who's currently leading the race but hasn't stopped yet. I wonder if that's an old message here. I think it must be, mustn't it? Because Norris has now been into the pits. It's a frustrating afternoon for Lando Norris, and it all came about once again because of his start. We've been talking about that over and over the last few races, where his starts, not always because of something he's done wrong, but his starts either through a sort of system failure or just a lack of traction have cost him something. You know, you could very much argue that his teammate Oscar Piastri was given the opportunity to win the race last week in Hungary because he had a great start.
I think I tried to get them, mate. What do you think? Have a go.
Verstappen saying, I think we should try to get them, mate. What do you think? And Gianpiero Lambiase, his engineer, says, have a go. And he is talking about George Russell, who is in front of him in 6th. And then Sergio Perez, who is not too far up the road either. Perez on the medium tyre, Russell and Verstappen on the hard. You know what? Overtaking is not as easy as we thought it would be.
It's not, and just to explain what that message was all about, because people might be thinking, well, of course you can have a go at him, why wouldn't you do that? He's trying to manage his tyres. Max Verstappen, whose voice you heard on the radio there, he's got to look after this hard set of tyres as best he can to try and go as long into this race as he can, because he's only got a medium set left, which will do a shorter stint. Here's Norris.
Okay, Lando, Carlos has stayed out. We've already got the gap, so the opportunity here is to pass the cars who we've got a tyre advantage over.
I'll come back to Norris in a moment, but with Verstappen, he's trying to manage that tyre, so just by going all out to try and get past Russell in front of him, he will cost himself tyre life. So that's what that little exchange was about. Yes, go for it now, see if you can use up a little bit of tyre performance, but get past, first of all, Russell, and then your teammate Perez, and then you've got a bit of a clear track to start moving forward. That's the conversation there. With Russell, it's with Norris rather, he is sitting further back in 8th, so he's behind Verstappen, but a bit of a gap back to Norris from Verstappen. He's talking about now just trying to get past the cars that have got a tyre offset. He stopped later than some cars around him. They now want to make use of those tyres whilst they've got the performance before we get to the end of the stint.
On to the Kemmel Straight for Max Verstappen. In front of him is George Russell, then his teammate Sergio Perez. Russell and Verstappen will both get the aid of DRS. Perez will not, but nobody really making massive moves apart from Lando Norris, who's just set the fastest lap of the race, a 1:47.5. That 6-second gap he had between himself and Verstappen when he fed out of the pit lane has now been cut down to 4.3. Last lap around as well for Max Verstappen was a 1:48.4. Russell was a 1:48.4. Perez a 1:48.4. It's hard to make true gains when you're all doing the same lap time.
Yeah, it is, and that's why Verstappen needs to get past those two cars, because at the moment he's a bit stuck. You know, he's stuck in this little train, so he needs to spend a little bit of that tyre life that he's got, that he's holding on to, but maybe he hasn't got enough of a performance advantage. He's closing up behind the Mercedes George Russell, but he needs to be really quite close as they come out of La Source, as they come out of turn 1, to get that run very close all the way down and then back up the hill onto the long Kemmel Straight, where he can use his DRS advantage. But at the moment, Russell also has DRS from the other Red Bull.
I tell you what though, further back, everybody is going to be hugely frustrated from 10th onwards, because they are all stuck behind Alex Albon, who is holding pretty much the second half of the field at bay. Albon's currently in 9th, running brilliantly well for Williams. Here's Sainz.
I think in plan B for medium, plan B for medium. I think they cannot go to the end. Let's wait a couple more laps. Okay, copy.
So do we think then, were Sainz and Ferrari attempting almost a one-stop?
It sounds like it, doesn't it? So they've got a lot of information on the medium tyre, of course, because a lot of people started the race on it. Of course, the cars are heavier at the start of the race, full of fuel. The circuit's a little bit less grippy, and you tend to be a bit more racy at that point. You're trying to get past cars that are all bunched up at the beginning. So you can make a tyre generally last a little bit longer in the later stages of the race. But he's asking there, can he hold on for a little bit longer? It's a long way to go if you're going to try and put a medium on now and go all the way to the end. I think it's a big ask, and possibly one that's going to massively compromise you. If you talk to Pirelli, they will definitely say this is a clear two-stop race. It's been on the edge in previous years, but this year with the new track surface, with these particular conditions and temperatures, they say it's definitely, the fastest way is definitely a two-stop. And when you're leading the race like this, I'm not sure gambling on something different is the way to go.
Yeah, this track was resurfaced all the way from Blanchimont through to Eau Rouge, and then down the Kemmel Straight through to Beau Rivage. So certainly grippier in parts, but then during the wet conditions yesterday, that can suddenly become a lot slippery and affect the degradation of all the tyres. High deg was expected after Friday's running. Lap 19 of 44 then. Sainz leads the race still without having come into the pits. Hamilton is second, effectively the race leader ahead of Leclerc. Then it's Piastri and Perez, the top five. Russell Verstappen, having started 11th, has made his way up into 7th. Norris is in a fierce battle with Verstappen. Strategy playing the long game here for both of them. And Norris is 8th. Then it's Albon in 9th, who is holding pretty much everybody else up behind him. Ricciardo is 10th. Then it's Alonso, Ocon, Gasly is 13th. Bottas, Hulkenberg, the top 15. Then it's Stroll, 16th. Then there's a bit of a gap to Logan Sargent. Kevin Magnussen, who finally called it quits to come into the pits a few laps ago, has come out in 18th ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. No Zhou Guanyu, suspected hydraulic issues for the Sauber man, who is out of this race. So just 19 drivers remain as George Russell has a little look down the end of the Kemmel Straight, tries the wider line as Perez defends coming into Les Combes, but wasn't really enough tarmac for Russell to try anything.
Yeah, he just needed another sort of 50 metres or so, because he had DRS and he closed right up, but it was just a little bit too late. What hasn't worked is Verstappen's little gamble at going for it to try and get past Russell and his teammate Perez, because he's actually dropped out of DRS. He's just dropped back into it now, but that gap opening and closing as Carlos Sainz is finally called into the pits from the lead of this Grand Prix. His first pit stop, of course, in the Belgian Grand Prix today.
Well, Carlos Sainz, yeah, indeed, has finally been told to box. He has about 3 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton, as we're just seeing a replay of Esteban Ocon making a move on Fernando Alonso. Line that one up Eau Rouge over the top of the hill at Radion. And then made the move stick. So Ocon now up into 11th. Ocon having started this race in 9th, so trying to recover positions that he pretty much lost on the first lap. Sainz comes into the pits then, and Lewis Hamilton takes over once more as the race leader. Let's head down to the pits. Sainz is in. Rosanna.
And he's already on his way out. It was a 2.6 stop time for the Ferrari crew. Carlos Sainz into the fast lane, which has also been resurfaced in the pit lane, and he's going to make his way back out on track. He just couldn't stay out any longer on those tyres. So here he is. He's rejoining the racetrack, and it's a little bit lonely there for him.
Thanks, Rosanna. So he does feed out behind Lando Norris. 4 seconds the gap. Sainz at 8th, and then there's 16 seconds back to Albon. But onto the Kemmel Straight now. This move's been coming for a while. George Russell all over the back of Sergio Perez. Perez tries to defend it, but can do nothing. Russell sweeps round the outside into the braking zone, gets the move done. Russell up into 4th, Perez down to 5th, and it's his teammate Max Verstappen who'll be looking to make a move next.
Yeah, and that's got to be so frustrating for Perez. Not only has he lost a place, but he's now got his teammate who started in P11 as opposed to Perez's front row start all over the back of his car, right in his mirrors. He's now got DRS on the other Red Bull. And actually, if you are Red Bull, if you're sitting on the Red Bull pit wall, it makes total sense to not have Perez hold up Verstappen, because if Verstappen's got any hope of getting a good result here, and don't forget he's in a championship fight, albeit with a healthy lead, he needs to start moving forward. He doesn't need to be held up by his teammate.
This race is fascinating though, isn't it? Because we all thought Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton, Ferrari and Charles Leclerc were kind of going to drop back, and so far they are 1 and 2 in this race. Max Verstappen started in 11th, and bear in mind he started from P14 back in 2022, and by lap 12 he was in the lead with lap 21, and he's only just gotten up into 6th place. That may well become 5th place in a few moments time, with Perez actually told to get into the pits and box. That's a nice clever way of Red Bull getting him out of the way of his teammate Verstappen, but bear in mind they are also on a different strategy. Perez getting rid now of the medium tyre, Verstappen on the hard tyre. Perez comes into the pits, that promotes Verstappen up into 5th, Norris up into 6th, who is now almost within DRS range of Max Verstappen, just over the second mark. You need to be within a second in the allocated zones. 2.2 seconds for Perez.
Yeah, decent stop. I can't help but feel that was engineered just to get out the way of Verstappen, as you said, because it actually cost Verstappen quite a few seconds over a couple of laps there, and it's allowed Lando Norris to get now very, very close in a McLaren, which we know has a lower downforce setup on it. They compromised yesterday's wet qualifying to aid them in today's race. That means it's going to be racy along that straight. It's going to be very quick in a straight line. Verstappen is going to have to watch it in his own mirrors now.
Perez only just fed out ahead of Alex Albon as well, but a new set of hard tyres for the Red Bull driver, so that should see him go well as we head into the second half of this race. We're now at about halfway distance to the Belgian Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton leads by almost 2 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. Oscar Piastri is 3rd, then it's George Russell. Max Verstappen now into the top 5, but Lando Norris is hunting him down on fresher tyres. Perez 7th, Sainz 8th, Albon 9th, Ocon the top 10. There are your point scorers. Then it's Alonso, Gasly, Ricciardo, Bottas and Stroll is 15th, ahead of Sargent, Magnussen, Tsunoda and Hülkenberg, who just came in for a second stop not too long ago.
We are very slow on the straights.
Perez saying we are very slow on the straights.
Yeah, I mean, Verstappen and Perez have got clearly a more high downforce setup than the McLaren. If I'm just looking on the screen that I'm watching, I've got Lando Norris behind Max Verstappen and closing, just looking at the rear wings. In fact, Norris now with DRS as they come down the hill. This could be the opportunity for the McLaren. A McLaren that's very quick in a straight line. They come through turn 1. Now they head all the way down the hill. Norris with DRS. That'll take them all the way through Eau Rouge, up the hill of Radion and onto that Kemmel Straight. Verstappen just pulling away a little bit, but this could be an opportunity, Harry, for the McLaren to find its way past.
Great fends off the track, but they've had a few skirmishes on the track in the last couple of rounds, and now both still Lando Norris mathematically in with a chance of the Drivers' Championship, even if he has to overhaul almost 76 points. Tried to get close at the end of the Kemmel Straight, not close enough, but is faster at the moment than the car in front of him. Lando Norris on the last lap around a 1:48.1, Verstappen a 1:48.4. Verstappen will get, no he won't get DRS from Russell, he's too far ahead of him, so that does give Norris the advantage of the drag reduction system, so we'll wait and see how that one pans out. The sound you're listening to now is the RB of Daniel Ricciardo, who with that DRS down the Kemmel Straight gets through on Logan Sargent, and Yuki Tsunoda will be trying to make a move on the American Williams driver in the next couple of corners. This is over 16th, 17th and 18th, so from what looked like it could have been a mega qualifying for the RB driver of Daniel Ricciardo, so far the race has proven tough, having started on the soft tyre, but still waiting to see how it will shake out. We are very much heading into the unknown. Tyre degradation, tyre management at an all-time high. And it's a Mercedes and a Ferrari who are 1 and 2. It's 3 different teams in the top 3.
Well, we definitely didn't expect that, but I think there's a lot still to shake out in this Grand Prix. We've got Lando Norris now chasing down Max Verstappen. Again, they come through turn 1 to start another lap in the DRS window for Norris. He'll be able to open the rear wing as they get onto that Kemmel Straight. Last time he wasn't quite close enough, but this looks like a good run through Eau Rouge. Not too much of a gap between them. They come up over the top, nice and clean, and onto the straight, and Norris will now open the flap on the rear wing, getting that extra speed as they go all the way along the Kemmel Straight. I don't think he's quite close enough again.
He's not close enough. has a little look, but then has to slam on the brakes and tuck in behind Verstappen, who is just getting a good enough run up the hill to hold his own. And actually Norris locking up massively in the build-up to that lap, which is perhaps why he got so close all of a sudden, basically cut the bus stop chicane. So really that would have been contested if he'd managed to make a move on that lap. So I think for the benefit of both, that hasn't happened, but certainly Lance Stroll, Lando Norris is certainly putting the pressure on Max Verstappen for that 5th place. It's not as easy as we all might have thought for Max Verstappen, having started down in 11th with a 10th-place grid penalty. It's Lewis Hamilton who leads the race by 2.5 seconds from Charles Leclerc. Further back, we just saw the RB driver Daniel Ricciardo get through on Logan Sargent at the end of the Kemmel Straight, proving not as easy for his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, going wheel to wheel with the American through Lecom. Nice fight, actually. Good racing between these two. It's not over points, but it's certainly over pride. And Sargent holding on to 17th at the moment in what could be his final race in his Grand Prix career. The American coming under increasing threat to lose that seat before the end of the season.
Yeah, and we are coming into this summer break here where we could well see a bit of a merry-go-round of drivers moving positions, even losing their seats halfway through a season. It doesn't happen very often, but this is an unprecedented driver market this time around, all triggered many months ago, of course, by Lewis Hamilton's shock announcement that he was moving to Ferrari. That's cascaded through the entire grid, people moving everywhere, seats available, and even people now under threat. One of those being Sergio Perez, who started today's race on the front row and is now sitting all the way down in P8. And I can't help but think that Sergio Perez's race has been compromised by having to move him out of the way of Max Verstappen on a stop lap on that middle stint, which would have been way earlier than he would have liked to have done. So he's now going to have to go a long way on the final set of tyres, managing that pace, and I can't see him making inroad. That's hugely disappointing to finish right at the bottom of the top 10 when he started on the front row with a very fast car. That's not good enough.
I think this also highlights how good a stint that was from Carlos Sainz as well in the early days. Yes, he's only 7th, which is where he basically started, but he went long and he's ahead of Sergio Perez on the road, and he is not too far behind his old teammate Lando Norris, a few seconds behind this fight that we're listening to now, which is indeed Lando Norris fighting with Max Verstappen. Indeed, while those two keep getting stuck behind one another, Sainz is actually slowly closing the gap on the medium tyre, whereas everybody else is on the hard tyre, as Lewis Hamilton was told to come into the pits just a few moments ago. Oh no, was it the Ferrari? It was the Ferrari that was told to come into the pits, and he indeed does so. Leclerc comes into the pits, slows down to 80 kilometres an hour, and greeting him at the Ferrari pits is Rosanna Tennant.
Yes, and his mechanics, and he's up and down very quickly on his way again. Actually, it was a bit of a slow stop, 3.4. It looks so fast always, but the figures tell us 3.4, so slow for Ferrari. But Charles Leclerc back out. He's going to rejoin the circuit. He's got rid of those hard tyres, and he has taken, as he just rounds the corner, another set of hards, and he's on his way again.
Yeah, thanks, Rosanna. Charles Leclerc was actually the only driver who had two new sets of medium and hard tyres. So he had the advantage really over everybody. He could be flexible, and that makes him a threat. Down in 7th at the moment. His teammate will be ahead of him on the back foot now, because we know Sainz is on a very different strategy.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that given that he was the only driver that had complete options, he could have gone new medium, he could have gone new hard. He's chosen to go the way he has, which is a stop around now to make that hard tyre go to the end of the race, we'd imagine. Now, if you think about the cars that are also in the sort of fight for this race, the Verstappens, the Norrises, for example, Verstappen, we know, will have to go onto the medium tyre. Now, that's obviously not the preferred option, certainly not in the eyes of Ferrari. Norris does have a new hard tyre, so we can expect Norris to go onto another hard tyre. If that's what everyone's thinking is working best right now, that will be the way to go. So that could potentially compromise Max Verstappen. But what he will have to do to make this work is not get embroiled in a big fight with Lando Norris, look after the tyres that he's on, and go as deep into this race as he can. So he's going to face an undercut at some point.
I think we'll have a one stop.
As Russell is told to think about the one stop, Hamilton is called into the pits, reacting to the pit stop from Ferrari for Charles Leclerc. In comes Lewis Hamilton. and he is in and out in 2.4 seconds, and I think that was the hard tyre going on to that Mercedes. Let's see where he feeds out. Sainz is going to go through, but we know Hamilton's battle is with Charles Leclerc. Where does Hamilton feed out in the running? Ahead of Charles Leclerc still. Sainz is the Ferrari ahead of him as Hamilton races on down towards Eau Rouge and up over the hill at Raidillon. Sparks flying as the Mercedes bottoms out on the hill, that 35-metre elevation change. Charles Leclerc chasing him down, the gap 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. Working out very nicely for Lewis Hamilton at the moment. This is a position he did not expect to find himself in. Nobody at the Mercedes team expected them to be in this place as the afternoon rolled on. But also interesting from Russell there. It's always interesting when you hear a driver starting to think about a strategy and suggest. It was Russell that suggested this idea of going for a one-stop. The team will now be obviously looking at data, looking at the tyre degradation, and they do that by comparing the performance drop-off of their tyres lap after lap after lap. So they know from that data they can project how much further they can go with the same amount of performance. Can he get to the end of this Grand Prix? That's a really interesting twist that I wasn't expecting to see this afternoon, but Russell currently in second place doesn't feel like he's got a match in performance for the likes of his teammate Hamilton, maybe for the likes of Leclerc in the Ferrari, and who knows what Verstappen and Norris might be able to do as the race rolls on. Russell feeling like he might be able to roll the dice and do something a little bit different.
So many questions still to answer in what is turning into another fascinating Grand Prix in this fascinating Formula One season. This is the Belgian Grand Prix, lap 27 of 44, and it is now lap 28 of 44, as Piastri currently has the lead, just sets the fastest laps. So Piastri being unleashed out front after Hamilton and Leclerc pitted last time around. They were your net leaders. Hamilton now ahead of Leclerc, but this is the final race before the August summer break.
This looks good, Oscar. This looks good. Let's go.
And this looks good, let's go, is the message given to Oscar Piastri. He's got over 5 seconds between himself and George Russell. This could be very good for Piastri. If his tyres are still in good nick, he's got fresher air in front of him and clearly got the pace. Last lap round, he was 7/10 quicker than George Russell ahead of him. What is Charles Leclerc doing is about equal to Leclerc's pace at the moment, 1:47.0.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton being slightly held up by Carlos Sainz and the other Ferrari, I think. He needed a bit of clear track in front of him.
Last lap was purple.
It goes without saying, but clean air is king.
That was Piastri's radio again. And what it means by the last lap was purple was that on the F1 official timing screens, when your lap time shows up as purple, it means it's the fastest of anybody. So Piastri now with the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, as Harry said earlier, he's putting in some blistering laps, and clean air is king because he's got a completely free track in front of him. There is nobody for almost half a lap up the road from Oscar Piastri. He can control his pace. He's got nobody to worry about getting in the way of him. He can now get the hammer down and start building this lead.
Piastri leads then, 5.2 seconds the gap to George Russell. Then it's Verstappen in third, Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz the top five. Sainz is actually told to pit after 7 laps on the medium tyre. So that is an interesting call from Ferrari and Sainz. He's got Hamilton right up behind him. Sainz comes into the pits.
It's also...
And Verstappen also into the pits.
Yeah, you're right, Verstappen in. So I was just going to say, it's also not good for Verstappen, is it? If Sainz is having to pit that early onto the medium, onto the hard tyre, I think it'll be for Sainz, but Verstappen having to go onto the medium tyre, there is a long way to go. 29 laps out of 44 in this Grand Prix, and Verstappen's got to do it on a medium tyre.
Yeah, that is a early pit stop for Carlos Sainz, who does feed out now, 2.6 seconds. He will come out just ahead of Esteban Ocon's Alpine. So Sainz now down to 8th spot on the hard tyre. Verstappen in 7th on the medium tyre. Let's see if the Red Bull fares any better on that medium compound. Perez now promoted back in front of his teammate, but not by much, only a couple of seconds. Perez perhaps on the better rubber on the hard tyre now. Could the race suddenly come back in the Mexican's favour?
Well, he's also got a long way to go on it, but now it doesn't seem like so much. I wonder if there is still another stop in this race somewhere for some people. I mean, there's still the possibility, of course, of a safety car. We haven't had any interruptions from race control at any point in this Grand Prix, and there's a lot of cars still very close to each other on the racetrack. That's not out of the question, and that could change everything. I've just been trying to look at the order and what people are on, which tyres are on, which strategy are on, trying to pick a winner here, trying to find out who's looking good, and I can't call it. There are so many different strategies at play here, people on lots of different race plans with different performance levels, with different amounts of life to go on a certain tyre, as Lando Norris is now called in response to Max Verstappen. So Verstappen trying to undercut, or making sure he protects from the undercut of Norris reacting.
Well, with 15 laps to go, Lando Norris is being called into the pits as he comes in and brakes for 80 kilometres an hour. Rosanna.
That seemed like quite a last-minute call. The mechanics were running out of the garage with the tyres. He's in, the tyres are off, and the hard tyres go back on, obviously a new set of them, and he's back out into the fast lane. So pitting for Lando Norris, he's just been passed by Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen on the road. Is he going to be able to get out ahead of Carlos Sainz? He's at pit exit now, Harry.
Yeah, it just feeds out. The way the pit lane works, that you feed out on the exit of La Source, turn 1, and he is behind both Red Bulls, but Norris on the hard tyre, Verstappen on the medium quicker, but the medium, will it last as long? The degradation certainly will be felt first on that medium tyre from Verstappen. So it's lap 30 of 44. Piastri leads by 5.5 seconds to Russell. Then it's Hamilton, Leclerc and Perez the top 5. Verstappen is 6th, Norris 7th, Sainz 8th, Ocon 9th, and Fernando Alonso rounds out the top 10. Let's check in with the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Andrew, last time we spoke to you, it could have been 5 or 6 winners in this race. How are you feeling about it now?
Well, to me it looks like the win is between Piastri, Hamilton and Leclerc. Piastri has got a 13-second lead over Hamilton. It's 18 seconds for a pit stop. He's trying to build a tyre offset, and by the looks of it, and come back to Hamilton and Leclerc after his pit stop. The question we've got to keep an eye now on Verstappen, who's just done his fastest first sector time after that pit stop, see how he gets on these medium tyres. And there's also the question of whether Russell is going to run one stop. I think that's unlikely, but let's see. Meanwhile, I think Piastri's just been called into the pits.
He has indeed, and Verstappen was let through to get by on Sergio Perez in what looked like a very orchestrated move. So Verstappen gets up to 5th, Perez now 6th, ahead crucially of Lando Norris as Piastri goes long in his pit box as the front jackman almost goes flying. He's fine, and they managed to get that car up in the air to change the tyres, but that is a 4.4 second stop, and that could cost Piastri greatly.
It's horrible when that happens, because everybody in the whole pit stop crew has to shuffle only about a metre or half a metre, but it costs you time. 4.4 seconds in a pit stop when you're in a position that Piastri was at the very front of this field is going to hurt, and it could well cost him a very difficult, a key position in this race. He's now going to be chasing down the likes of, Norris now chasing down the likes of Perez. Perez's job here is to try and hold him up, but I don't think there's much he can do about the fast McLaren.
No, down the Kemmel Straight with the aid of DRS, which gives you around about 0.6 of a second advantage over the car in front. Norris makes it look easy. Perez cannot do anything, and it's Norris up into 6th come the end of the Kemmel Straight into the braking zone of Lecombe, and Perez is down to 7th. And this is the sound of Oscar Piastri going long in his pit box. Just have a listen to this.
He actually locked locked the front tyres as he came in, which is not uncommon, but he slid way further than he should have done. Everybody has to shuffle on their knees with the wheel guns, still get the job done very quickly, of course, but of course that little shuffle, that movement of position just costs you a bit of time, and 4.4 seconds is unfortunately a very slow pit stop in today's world.
Yeah, and lots of R's from the McLaren garage as we get a replay of the front jackman, who did take a little bit of a hit there, but is fine and smiling, helmet off, and the team making sure he was okay straight after that stop. So that is good to see. Russell on the radio now.
George, just confirming you're happy to stay out. We've got 3 cars now.
Yes.
Window. Copy.
Okay, so Russell happy to stay out then. He has become now the leader of this Grand Prix. It is lap 32 of 44 of the Belgian Grand Prix. Russell leads Hamilton by 7 seconds. Then it's Charles Leclerc in 3rd. Piastri is 4th after a slow stop. Verstappen has worked his way now up into 5th, having started 11th. Norris is 6th and chasing the Dutchman. Perez down to 7th. Sainz is 8th ahead of Alonso. Valtteri Bottas has worked his way up into the top 10. He said he could smell points before this race. Could that happen?
Lando, these tyres are robust. Happy to push on them.
And that is the key, you know, that's Lando Norris being told he's on the hard tyre as opposed to Max Verstappen on the medium. Max has to really look after those medium tyres. The harder tyre on Norris's car is very robust. You can afford to push on it for longer. It'll still deliver the performance you need and last for the remainder of this Grand Prix. This is a rare occurrence, I think, when Red Bull as a team have got their strategy wrong here. And what I mean by that is early in the weekend, they made the decision to use the hard tyres throughout the practice sessions, and that meant they only had the mediums left for today's race. And it's now proving, as many people predicted, by the way, that the hard tyre is the best race tyre in these conditions. We are going to see, I'm sure, Lando Norris at some point finding his way past a Red Bull that's going to be, by the end of the race, floundering on those medium tyres.
At the moment, Norris still there behind him, coming through Stavelot, just stalking Verstappen.
I think London pushing behind me, so let me know what you want me to do.
Yeah, we're happy for you to push now, Max, as well. Happy to push.
Two can play that game, and they are both pushing. Verstappen 5th, Norris 6th. Norris is just within DRS zone as they come through Blanchimont.
Yeah, so with that DRS, of course, that's why Max is on the radio saying, look, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to use up, again, some similar message than we had before, do you want me to use up this tyre life, or do you want me to protect the tyres? If I protect the tyres, there's a good chance Lando's going to get past me, so can I just push a little bit to try and break DRS? He hasn't managed to do it because Lando now comes through La Source, the beginning of the lap, close enough to be able to get DRS as they go down the hill and then back up the other side onto the straight.
Just as a pre-warning, we will be rejoining the main station on 5 Live, so if we do have a little bit of a pause in the coverage, that will be why, but do not adjust anything. We will continue the coverage, but right now onto the Kemmel straight. Lando Norris is behind Verstappen, but Verstappen is just able to get a good run up the hill through Eau Rouge and Raidillon, and Norris cannot close in on the straights. Through they go, through Lecon, out through Malmedy, the right-hander, and then downhill towards almost the never-ending right-hander of Beau Rivage, into the left-hander, the corner with no name, or renamed the Jackie X corner, whichever one you want to go for, and then through down towards the double left-hander of Pouon, now into the middle sector of this lap, nestled within the Ardennes Forest, this Spa-Francorchamps circuit, lap 33 of 44, getting into the closing stages of this race. Who is going to win the Belgian Grand Prix, Mark Priestley?
I cannot call it at the moment, but it is going to be very close. And as we said earlier on, the really exciting part of this is that we've got a lot of cars now, some of them on slightly differing strategies, different tyre ages, even different tyres in the hands of Max Verstappen, and we're going to see all that converging in the closing laps. Just around 10 laps to go now. George Russell crosses the line to start another lap on the set of hard tyres that he's been on now for quite a long period of time. Just one stop for the Mercedes car of George Russell. His teammate Hamilton right behind him, or 5 seconds behind him in the other Mercedes. They're in a very strong position right now. The two Mercedes have the opportunity to kind of do what they want to some extent. Leclerc not really posing too much of a threat. He's in third in the Ferrari, but nearly 3 seconds back and not troubling the Mercedes. So they've got a little bit of comfort in that Mercedes team right now to decide what they want to do, manage the pace to some extent at least, and see if they can get George Russell to the end of this race without stopping again.
He's done a really good job so far, you have to say, Russell, having started from 6th, and now he is nursing those tyres to the finish. A one-stop strategy for George Russell, whereas his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who's led the majority of this Grand Prix, having started in 3rd, made a mega start. Now they elected to go on the 2-stop strategy, both on the hard tyre, but Hamilton 5.5 seconds behind his teammate, but going quicker than Russell ahead. Leclerc is 3rd, Piastri and Verstappen in 5th, and a bit of a stalemate developing between Verstappen and Norris. That gap that was less than a second has now opened up to 1.2 seconds. So has that fight just been put on hold for the moment?
Yeah, I think so. It's Piastri really who's the man who's really trying to push and get past the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc in front of him. That will be the fight for the 3rd position in the race right now. Could well remain the fight for the podium positions. Here's Hamilton.
How much quicker than him? Am I targeting to beat him or not? It's close. It is close. That's it.
That sounds like it's game on for the two Mercedes drivers. If he can push and get up to the back of Russell, game on with 10 laps to go for the win of this race between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton.
We didn't think we'd be saying that, did we, before this all kicked off today? Oscar Piastri now with DRS behind Charles Leclerc on the run down the hill. He's very, very close as they turn in through La Source. They'll go all the way down past the pit straight and get up the other side and into that long DRS zone. 10 laps to go. Is Piastri going to find his way back into a podium position here? I think he may well do.
Up the hill, over Radion, down the Kemmel Straight. The Papaya McLaren opens the DRS board, tucks himself right up beneath the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, who tries to defend round the outside for Piastri through Lecombe, but there's not enough room, and Leclerc holds the position for the time being. Leclerc clinging on to that final podium spot. Piastri, though, hunting for it, trying to make amends for that slow pit stop.
Yeah, he went to the outside, Piastri. Charles Leclerc sort of moved to the inside to defend, which forced Piastri to the outside, and that wasn't the place to be. You really need to commit on the inside. Here's Verstappen.
10 laps to go. 10 of your finest, mate. Come on.
10 of Max Verstappen's finest laps. I fear Verstappen at his finest form. He's 3.6 seconds behind Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris is still now, he's actually got the gap back down to within just under a second. Norris does hold the fastest lap. It is going to be a tight finish. Hamilton is trying to close up to the back of his teammate, but he's not closing quickly enough. Under 4.5 seconds is the gap between Russell and Hamilton. If it continues at this pace, in about 5 laps he might well be able to have a go at him, but we're on lap 35 of 44, so it's going to be extremely close in the final stages of this Grand Prix.
Yeah, there's going to be a job for Mercedes in managing their drivers. We saw it at McLaren last week in Hungary. It could be the job of Mercedes pitwall this time to manage how they negotiate the closing laps with two drivers potentially fighting for the same bit of tarmac. We may well even get that happening at McLaren again, because if Norris can get past Verstappen and he's right underneath the rear wing now with DRS as they come down the hill, he will then find himself with the next man up the road, his own teammate again, Oscar Piastri. So that fight is on as well.
Hamilton made a second up on Russell on that last lap around. Meanwhile, Piastri's going to have another go at Charles Leclerc down the Kemmel Straight. Leclerc looks in his mirrors, moves to the inside defensive line, round the outside for Piastri. It's side by side through Lecombe. That becomes the inside for Piastri. Lovely move from the Australian, the newest member of the Grand Prix winner club, makes his way up into the podium positions. Piastri third, Leclerc fourth.
That was great driving. It was great driving from both of them, because Leclerc pushed him in exactly the same way he did the lap before. He went to the inside to defend, but this time Piastri still went round the outside, but he committed. He didn't back out. He went all the way round and he made it stick. Great driving from both of them. Great respect between the pair. Very, very close, staying within track limits. Yeah, nicely done. And that is the sort of drive that Oscar Piastri needs to be showing right now when we're talking about championship contention for perhaps Lando Norris, this battle for number 1 and number 2 status within the team. Piastri needs his elbows out like that more and more.
Lovely, lovely move from both Piastri and Leclerc. They're giving him room. Fair racing from the two of them. Back up front, the gap now less than 4 seconds between George Russell, who leads this Grand Prix as he crosses the line to start lap 37 of 44. Lewis Hamilton is behind and stalking him as Russell makes his way through La Source. Out through turn 1 now goes Lewis Hamilton, 3.7 seconds. Piastri now in third, Leclerc fourth, Verstappen in fifth. Norris, though, is 0.4 of a second behind Max Verstappen. That fight still well and truly on. Perez a further 9 seconds adrift. Then it's Sainz, Alonso, Stroll the top 10. Ricciardo's 11th, Ocon 12th, Albon, Magnussen, Gasly the top 15. Then comes Tsunoda, Bottas, who's just pitted ahead of Hulkenberg, and Logan Sargent 19th and last. Only 19 drivers still in this one, with Joe Guan Yu retiring early doors with hydraulic issues for his Sauber.
Yeah, this is shaping up to be a real blockbuster finish. It really is. The two Mercedes are going to end up very, very close to each other in the closing laps here. What can Verstappen do? He's on a medium tyre, which is going to start to run out of life in the closing laps here, being chased down by Lando Norris on a 1 lap fresher, but crucially harder compound tyre. Lando Norris, you would think, is in the box seat out of those two. do, but Max Verstappen is Max Verstappen. He won't be passed easily, and that is going to be a fight, I'm sure, that will run all the way until the final laps. But I think, as we go back to our predictions for who could win this race, it is looking more and more like one of the two Mercedes, and nobody would have predicted that at the start of today.
No, they were. Lewis Hamilton was downplaying their chances ahead of the race this afternoon, but it has been anything but a fantastic start to this race by Lewis Hamilton to get the lead early doors. But Russell has been fantastic on his tyres and eking them out, managing to make a one-stop strategy work. However, his teammate has been closing in on him at a rate of knots. Hamilton, who has elected to stop one additional time compared to his teammate. The gap as they cross the line for lap 38, 2.8 seconds now. Piastri's a further 5.5 seconds down the road. Norris is still behind Verstappen. He cannot find a way through. He gets oh so close, almost within half a second in the first part of the lap, but then is not able to catch up down the Kemmel straight for the McLaren man, who is desperate to get past the Red Bull.
Yeah, and the problem for Verstappen is that he's now, it's sort of a problem, but he's now up behind the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, which you'd think might be a great thing, of course. If he can get DRS, of course that'll help him. But chasing another car in these closing laps when he's trying to defend from Norris is going to hurt these tyres. And Verstappen's job is all about looking after these tyres whilst maintaining pace. If we go just quickly to the other Red Bull, Sergio Perez, down in P7, which is a really disappointing day, but he's now coming under massive pressure from the other Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, now just 0.4 of a second behind Perez with DRS. Perez could find himself only just inside the top 10 here.
This has been a tough race for Sergio Perez and not what he wanted. Hearing there'll be crunch talks over his future on the Monday following this Grand Prix at Red Bull headquarters. The other Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, is fading a little bit now after being passed by Piastri. And Leclerc 1.2 seconds ahead of Verstappen for the time being. So that could play a factor in the closing stages between this battle over what could be 4th, 5th and 6th. Leclerc 4th, Verstappen 5th, Norris in 6th. Then comes Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz is in the top 8. Thanks, Mark. And it has been a fascinating Grand Prix so far. You do close us you find us in the closing stages of this Grand Prix. It's lap 39 of 44. George Russell leads this race by just under 2 seconds in his Mercedes, ahead of his teammate Lewis Hamilton. This win is now between the two Mercedes drivers, and we didn't expect that at the start of this Grand Prix. Russell has got there by only stopping once, but he is managing his hard compounder tyre, whereas Lewis Hamilton has stopped twice and is closing rapidly in on his teammate. Oscar Piastri is a further 5 seconds down the road in 3rd. Charles Leclerc put up a valiant fight, but is now fading in 4th. Max Verstappen has recovered from 11th on the grid to 5th in a fierce fight now with Leclerc and Lando Norris behind. The McLaren driver cannot find a way through though on Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez, meanwhile, having started this race in 2nd, a race where he really needed to prove that he was still the man for Red Bull, still the man to be in that number 2 seat alongside Max Verstappen, but he has just been passed for 8th, for 7th place now. Carlos Sainz swept round the outside of them at the end of the Kemmel straight. The Ferrari driver now in 7th. Perez down to 8th with Alonso and Ricciardo rounding out the top 10. They are your point scorers. Lap 39 of 44, and the gap out front, Mark, is now 1.3 seconds. Mark Prix, the former McLaren mechanic, joins me.
Yeah, exactly. Just over 4 laps to go now, 5 laps to go, and that is the gap that Lewis Hamilton has to close down. 1.3 seconds in those 5 laps. He can do it because he's got a much younger tyre. They're both in the hard compound, but George Russell been nursing his set for a very long period of time. They do go a long way in these Grand Prix. They're very robust tyre, but now Lewis Hamilton within distance. He is just behind the sister Mercedes as they come down past the start-finish straight, past the pits, into the first corner. Lewis Hamilton, is he close enough as they come down through Eau Rouge and up into Radion and onto that Kemmel straight? Is he close enough to make use of DRS and make a move on his teammate?
5 laps to go, Mark. Is this really going to be a fight? Because Hamilton has the advantage of fresher rubber.
Yes, if you can get close enough to him, you'd expect with DRS and with the long slipstream you get that he'll be able to get past. But we're seeing a hard tyre here that's very robust.
It's a good lap, Oscar. Hamilton's catching Russell ahead. There's going to be action ahead. We want to be there.
Yeah, so that's Oscar Piastri, who's currently in third in the McLaren, being told that when these two Mercedes up front get into a fight, anything could happen. They could go off the road, they could make a mistake, and Piastri needs to start closing up to take advantage of anything like that. But I think, yes, the fight is on between the two Mercedes. Yes, it should be a relatively straightforward pass, but he's only eking away at that gap. It's not like he can drive up to him with ease. He's chipping away at it, and he has been doing so now for quite a few laps, so it is still going to be close.
Just outside of the top 10, by the way, is Esteban Ocon in 11th. Then it's Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. Albon, Magnussen and Gasly make up the top 15. Bottas, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg and Sargent is 19th and last. No Joe Guanyu in the Sauber. He retired due to suspected hydraulic issues and was out early doors. So just 19 drivers left in this race, where we haven't even had any kind of safety car intervention either. We've jinxed it now, haven't we? There was an 80% chance over the last 5 rounds if you calculate it up. But so far, we've had some brilliant racing, some fascinating strategy plays, and a race that we really did not know which way it was going to go.
Just make sure you give each other plenty of space.
And a fair radio message there from Peter Bonington, Lewis Hamilton's race engineer. Just give each other plenty of space. Hamilton is now within the DRS zone. That's the drag reduction system, where the rear wing flies open at the press of a button in the allocated zones. One of them coming up now, the Kemmel Straight, when you are within a second of the car in front. It gives the car behind around about a 6/10 of a second advantage. It's enough for Lewis Hamilton to close right up to the back of George Russell, but they reach the braking zone into Lecombe, the right-hander, followed by the left. Then it's another sweeping right-hander out through Malmedy, the gravel to your left, downhill braking through the right-hander of Beau Rivage towards the corner with no name. Tough to overtake in this middle part of the lap, but Hamilton is poised and ready.
Yeah, and Hamilton's got to be patient here. He's still got 3 or 4 laps in which to do this. Now that he's got into that DRS zone, he's now close enough. If he can stay there, manage his pace, manage his tyres, it'll be next time around. He's now very, very close, and I suspect when they come back round along that Kemmel Straight next time, Lewis with the DRS there will be able to get past. This is going to be an impressive day for Mercedes, assuming they can get past each other without any trouble. This will be an unbelievably good result that they were not expecting today. No one was expecting today, but a really great sign that this is a team well on its way back to top performance.
Their last 1-2 finish for Mercedes was back in 2022. It's been a long road for Mercedes, but the last few rounds have seen them really up their game, with Lewis Hamilton leaving the team at the end of the season to join Ferrari. But teammates have been allowed to battle it out front. But Russell, with the advantage of track position, leads this race with 3 laps to go, but he's on older tyres, having only stopped once. Hamilton, who has led the majority of this race in the early stages, has pitted an additional time and is now within half a second of his teammate. But while they do battle, the McLaren of Oscar Piastri is just lurking in the wings, a couple of seconds behind. Up over the hill, through Beau Rivage and through Radion, down onto the Kemmel Straight. The DRS flap flies open for Hamilton. Russell looking at his mirrors. Hamilton moves to the inside, has a little look down the inside, but he's not close enough, and Russell doesn't get caught out by any kind of dummy attempts from his teammate. Russell holding firm in the lead.
Yeah, and that was very close, but Hamilton again just got to be patient. He's got time. He's still got another 3 laps to do this, and he just needs to stay close, get a good run out of Eau Rouge and up the hill, and then he gets close enough. It was very, very close that time, but of course they can't risk a great big lunge like you might do if it was another competitor from a different team. They've got to be respectful of each other, they've got to be respectful of the team, and that perhaps makes the overtake a little bit harder to do, and maybe for George Russell a little bit easier to defend.
Just behind this battle as well, Charles Leclerc is 4th, but he has got Verstappen and Lando Norris now right on his rear wing. The Ferrari driver struggling out there. Verstappen within DRS, still keeping Lando Norris at bay. Then it's Sainz in 7th, ahead of Sergio Perez. Alonso and Ocon round out the top 10. But on lap 42, as we approach the end of it, out of 44 laps around this, the longest circuit on the Formula One calendar here at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, in the Ardennes forest. The sun is shining down and the battle is well and truly on for the win. It's George Russell with the advantage for the time being, but Hamilton is faster. Hamilton is closing right up through La Source, and actually Piastri in the Papaya McLaren has really made inroads on these two as they continue to battle. I wouldn't rule out Piastri too much, but will there be enough time in this race? What are we going to see in the next lap and a half? Half a second splits the two Mercedes onto the Kemmel Straight, the first of the really easy overtaking opportunities with that aid of the drag reduction system, but Hamilton still can't get through on Russell.
Still not close enough. It's going to be frustrating for Hamilton. Piastri doing exactly the right thing as Sergio Perez takes advantage of a great big gap behind him and jumps into the pits, I guess, for a run at the fastest lap. He'll probably put on let's just see, probably a soft set of tyres, I would imagine, on perhaps a medium. I don't know what he's got. A soft set of tyres on the car of Sergio Perez. So that's just a desperate hope to see if he can do anything about regaining something from this race. He's down in 8th place, having started on the front row. Massively disappointing. It could even be the final race that Sergio Perez drives in Formula One, certainly for Red Bull. We don't know. We'll wait and see. Decisions being made over the summer break, but this could be his last shot to do something impressive and try and drag a great lap time out of that car.
Yeah, he would have done that to get the fastest lap, which gets you an extra bonus point if you finish within the top 10 of the race. So Sergio Perez at the moment on course for 8th place. That would give you 4 points. With the additional fastest lap, he would get 5. It's small crumbs, but it's something for Red Bull in what is now a battle on for the Constructors' title, with McLaren on course to finish ahead and outscore them, with McLaren 3rd, with Piastri, Norris in 6th for the time being. Final lap of the race for the Belgian Grand Prix, and the winner still yet to be decided. Half a second between the two Mercedes drivers. George Russell leads, Lewis Hamilton leads Oscar Piastri, who might well just have gotten within the DRS zone of Hamilton as they make their way up the 35-metre elevation change through Eau Rouge, at the top of the hill, through Radion, onto the Kemmel Straight. This is when Hamilton needs to find the way through here. Can Hamilton regain the lead of the Belgian Grand Prix? He has a look, but it's no dice. Russell holds on.
What an unbelievable drive from George Russell this is shaping up to be, nursing tyres for more than half the race and keeping the performance alive. His teammate Lewis Hamilton getting so frustrated, he's just locked a tyre going into that corner, with Piastri now right underneath the rear wing of the second Mercedes. So Hamilton needs to just be a little bit careful that he doesn't make a mistake that costs him that vital second place, because a 1-2 finish for Mercedes will be an unbelievable result. And by the way, a really strong result in that it'll be the first time in a while they have managed to get consistently the Works team cars in front of a McLaren using that same engine that a lot of people have been talking about as being the fastest car in Formula One right now.
Came into the weekend with an upgrade, did Mercedes, but there were too many question marks over it, so they decided to abandon ship on that one and revert back to a previous spec, and that seems to have been a stroke of genius by a team who have languished in no man's land over the last couple of years, but seem to have found their form once more. Now, with 2 race wins so far this season, looking at getting a 3rd, looking at getting their first 1-2 finish since 2022. Out of the final corner, it's going to be to the line, but it goes the way of George Russell, who wins the Belgian Grand Prix. It's a British 1-2 with Lewis Hamilton following in 2nd, and Oscar Piastri follows up his first Grand Prix victory from last weekend with another podium finish in 3rd. What a mighty end to the Belgian Grand Prix, but for George Russell it is a 2nd win of the season and a fantastically driven race from both Mercedes drivers.
Unbelievable stuff. And don't forget, it was George Russell who made the call on strategy.
Come on! Oh, boys and girls, what a performance!
Whoa, well done. Awesome work.
Oh!
Mercedes.
Oh, yes! Amazing strategy, guys.
Amazing strategy, amazing call by George Russell, who wins the Belgian Grand Prix. Hamilton 2nd, Piastri 3rd. Let's do a quick check-in with how the cricket is going. Henry Moran. Bryce Henry, a great day for England then so far. Hopefully we might be able to do that in more of the Olympic action later on this afternoon for Team GB, but also it's a British 1-2 in the Belgian Grand Prix. George Russell out of the car, runs over to his team. He is elated, Mark Priestley. That was a fantastic win, and Lewis Hamilton actually gets out of the car rather slowly, a little bit forlornly.
Well, he did say there was something moving in the cockpit, didn't he? Right at the beginning of the race, something down where his legs were in the cockpit. I wonder if that's causing some discomfort, because he's very gingerly stepped out of the car. Looks a little bit, well, he looks worn out, doesn't he? I mean, it was a tough old Grand Prix, but what a fantastic result. And George Russell, it needs to take a lot of credit there, because we heard the radio call. What do you think about the one stop? Do you think we can make it work? It was his idea. I'm sure they've talked about it before, but it wasn't the most the predicted fastest way around this racetrack and to complete this race, but he's made it work. And he made it work still with a considerable amount of performance left at the end of that race to be able to hold off his teammate and Oscar Piastri. Great stuff.
He started this race down in 6th position, did George Russell, and he's sort of fallen to the floor a bit just to take his helmet off. He looks exhausted. There is sweat dripping off of his hair onto his brow. That was probably one of the hardest earned wins of George Russell's career, and there haven't been that many of them, but that was a hard earned win. Fantastic work. Hamilton second, Piastri third, Charles Leclerc ended up fourth. He did stay ahead of Max Verstappen, who did beat Lando Norris to the line. The McLaren driver couldn't find a way through. Carlos Sainz, for all his might, the strategy didn't quite work out for him. He finishes where he started in 7th, and Sergio Perez, big questions over his future remain, having started this race on the front row, finishing down in 8th. He did get that extra point for the fastest lap. Fernando Alonso picks up 2 points in 9th, and Esteban Ocon saves the day for Alpine with 1 point for the Frenchman, rounding out the top 10. And then it's Ricciardo, Stroll, Albon, Gasly, Magnussen the top 15, Bottas ahead of Tsunoda, Sargent 18th, Nico Hulkenberg 19th, and last Zhou Guanyu for Sauber, the only retirement for him, and the Sauber team continue with 0 points to their name, the only team yet to get off the mark. But smiles all round at the front of the field for George Russell. What confidence must that give him going into the summer break at a time when he now needs to show that he is the number one, he is the team leader, he is the man to move Mercedes forward in their post-Hamilton era. Here he is first.
Amazing strategy. You guys are the best. Come on.
It's a pretty good drive.
Yeah, that was right. Yes! Woohoo!
Tire whisperer.
Tire whisperer.
It was all right.
It was better than all right. It was absolutely brilliant. He doesn't yet know who his teammate is going to be in that Mercedes team next year, but he's staking a very good claim for whoever it is going to be, is that he is the man. He's the man who's in there at the moment, he's the incumbent, and he is staking a claim for being a team leader, as you said. That was a real team leader's drive today. It's not a young driver's drive. It was someone with experience, which of course he's got now, making decisions or suggesting things for strategy, questioning, here on the radio, talking to his engineers, and he's confident enough now to put his own opinions forward about how the team should move forward, in which direction, and those are the kind of things that you need when someone's leading a team. So great stuff.
Let's head down to Rosanna Tennant.
Toto Wolff, congratulations. What a result. Did you see that coming?
No, it wasn't expected. Friday was so difficult. And then we did the right things overnight, and here we are. We're finishing 1 and 2.
The strategy call was exemplary, but that came from George, didn't it? Tyre whisperer, as you called him.
Yeah, it was at the moment we had no choice. Both planners said P5, and then we said, we're just going to keep it out there. Nothing to lose.
Does that little upgrade go in the bin now? Are we back to the old spec for the second half of the season?
No, there's no such thing as bin. We're learning from race to race.
Enjoy your holidays. What a way to go into them.
Thank you.
Rosanna Tennant speaking to Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes. Right, we're a bit late, but let's hear from Oscar Piastri, who finished third, talking to Gunther Steiner.
Happy with the result. I think we managed the race very well. I think that's the second or third time this year we've tried to run over the front jack, so I'll try not to do that next time. But no, very happy with the result, and I don't think we could have done too much more.
What was missing in the end not to get to P1? What do you think? Was it strategy? Was it the speed? What was it?
I think just not quite enough speed. I think it took me a couple of laps to get past Charles, and I really overheated the tyres doing that. But yeah, I mean, clearly the pace for George staying out there on one set of hards was the right thing to do. So we just didn't quite have enough pace to mow him down. Even Lewis, didn't quite have enough. So I think we did a lot of things right, gave ourselves the best opportunities we could, but in the end, wasn't quite enough.
It must be a good feeling to go into the summer break with a podium and getting ready for afterwards. How do you feel about the next races coming up?
Positive. Yeah, I mean, it's been a really good couple of weeks for myself and the whole team, of course. A lot of points. We still made inroads on Red Bull today, and that's a really positive thing going into the break. I think everyone's looking forward to a bit of a break. I know I am, so I can heal up a little bit, but no, it's been a fun couple of weeks, and looking forward to some time relaxing and coming back even stronger in the second half.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Enjoy the summer break, Oscar.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
I'll go on.
Yes.
What's the date?
Sorry?
Hi, Luis. Congratulations to P2. It's a fantastic result for Mercedes. I want to. I mean, did you expect this starting the race or starting the weekend?
No, we definitely didn't. And first I have to say congratulations to George and to the team. No, we had such a disaster on Friday. The car was really nowhere, and we made some changes. Hard to see what it was going to feel like, obviously, because of the wet yesterday. But the car was fantastic today, and we really owe it to everyone both here doing a solid job through the pit stops and strategy, and and the guys back at the factory.
Yeah, as I said, it's a fantastic race. How tough were the last laps behind George? How much were you tempted to attack and to try to do it?
I mean, I was trying to get closer, obviously, but George did a great job on going long on the tires. Every stint I had tires left, but the team pulled me in. So, unfortunate, but it is one of those days.
You for sure must be pumped up now for what is coming after the summer break, because your team is performing very good in the moment, not only now, but the last races. So, do you think you can go for the championship?
No.
You never know.
High hopes.
Luis.
It would be high hopes, but if we can continue this kind of performance as we've had the last few races, which has been fantastic, I think if we can start our weekends off a little bit better, hopefully we can continue. I think obviously the McLaren was very strong today, but we were just a bit further ahead early on. We just got to keep pushing.
Congratulations and enjoy the summer break.
Lewis Hamilton there speaking to the former Haas team principal, Gunther Steiner. Here's your race
George.
winner.
I'm almost speechless, from your race. I mean, that takes a lot. But anyway, a race with 3 cars at the end in 1.1 second, fighting every little bit. So how tough was it in the end to hold off Lewis?
Yeah, amazing result. We definitely didn't predict this win this morning in our strategy meeting, but the car was feeling really awesome, and we made a lot of changes from Friday night, and the tyres just felt great, and I just kept saying, I think we can do the one stop, and the strategy did a really great job, and also, well done to Lewis, because he really controlled that race, and circumstances were slightly different. I'm sure he would have got the victory, but 1-2 for the team was such an awesome result and such a great way to go into the break.
So who was the genius behind this one stop? Who was the genius behind that one?
I mean, I was focusing a lot during the race, so I'll have to listen to the radio comms back, but it was, it was a team effort. Joey, Leo, all the strategy guys did an amazing job, and always it's that team effort. So we rolled the dice, but it was only possible because the car was feeling really great and the pace was there. So 1-2, such a good result.
Yeah, I'm sure now you cannot wait to get the summer break over and go to Zandvoort to the next race. I think because I think you are pretty hyped up to go to the next race, because I think Mercedes as a team now is in a good position to win more. I mean, It's your third one this year, but
absolutely, yeah, it's three wins in 6. I think it is for us now. I'd want another race next weekend, to be honest. Just feeling so good. The team have been working so hard, and so well deserved for everybody back at Brackley and Brixworth.
Perfect. Congratulations again. Enjoy the summer break and see you in Zandvoort.
Well, at the track where he achieved his first Formula One podium, George Russell takes a win for Mercedes, his second win of the season. Fantastic work from him. We didn't predict it, but that's Formula One at the moment. It continues to be unpredictable in 2024. He wins the race ahead of Lewis Hamilton, and Oscar Piastri rounds out the top three. That is it from us for the time being. My thanks to Mark Priestley, to Rosanna Tennant, to Andrew Benson as well. We're going to digest all of that action in the BBC F1 Checkered Flag podcast, which will be out later today in a couple of hours' time for all of the post-Belgium wrap-up. It's the summer break now. Formula One next appears in Zandvoort in the Netherlands, in Max Verstappen's hometown. But for now, from Belgium, it's back to you, Mark, in Paris.
And we'll keep combining everything that's going on here in Paris.